Well, welcome again then to the latest NHS X Space on behalf of the Workers' Party with myself, Chris Williamson, and Dr. Bob Gill. Let me start by wishing you a belated Happy New Year, Bob. I know you were in the hot seat last week, but unfortunately I'd got a family commitment, so I wasn't able to be with you. But I understand it was another interesting X Space. So, as I say, Happy New Year, mate.
Happy New Year to you, Chris. Good to see you back.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, Bob, we've got quite a lot to talk about, as usual. More stuff to talk about than we've actually got time to actually consider today. But there's a few things really, and obviously we want people who are listening in to make their views known to us, their contributions, their questions to Bob, if you have any. But a few things I wanted to sort of focus on today really is the shortage of the consultants. Stroke consultants, which is a major issue, Bob, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that. This new online service, there's 9 or something like that, 9 new online NHS services. I think we briefly touched on this in a previous X Space, but I think as this is a kind of developing issue, it'd be good to get your thoughts on that, and also the fact that the private health insurance, is basically a con, and there's one specific case which I think, Bob, you've railed about on a number of different occasions, but I think it'd be worth to sort of exploring that a bit more. The James Guthrie case, where he was charging an exorbitant amount of money for his insurance premiums because he had a complicated health condition, and then also the Zionist charter, which is being inflicted on the National Health Service, the so-called working definition of anti-Semitism, the IHRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism, which runs to, I think it's something like 285 words, Bob, and has 11 clauses and mentions Israel on 7 occasions. I mean, you don't need 285 words to work out what anti-Semitism is. The Oxford Dictionary definition of anti-Semitism is very clear. It's hostility or prejudice against Jews because they are Jews. And that's all you need. You don't need 200, unless, of course, you want to provide an excuse to chill free speech in relation to the Holocaust, for example, that the Israelis have been visiting on the Palestinian people, this genocide in Gaza, which has been ongoing for 2 years. And that, I think, was imposed in October, but there's been a legal challenge to it. And I'm hoping that one of the people involved in that challenge will be able to join us today and perhaps contribute to the discussion. But let's start off, Bob, if we can, with this issue about the shortage of stroke consultants.
Yeah, so Chris, this is an important subject. It follows on the article that we were looking at, was published in The Guardian. Shortage of NHS stroke specialists resulting in thousands dead or disabled, say doctors. Now, that was based on a survey of stroke specialists, but we need a bit of background. What is key to understand is, for everybody wanting to go on to be a stroke specialist, first they have to apply to become an internal medicine consultant. Now, there are 8,800 applicants to become an internal medicine consultant, but there are only 1,678 posts. So right at the start, we have a bottleneck in terms of bringing through consultants who might go on and specialize in stroke medicine. Now, that is a competition ratio of 5.2 applicants for every job that is available. So we have a government that has set a deliberate bottleneck in terms of training consultants. Now, what is the result of this? Well, the survey of stroke consultants pointed out that there are 100,000 strokes every year, and shockingly, 10 to 20% of those strokes end up suffering death or disability due to delays in treatment and diagnosis. So that is having a huge impact. Not only are people dying, but many will suffer lifelong disability as a result of delays in treatment. Now, why is it so important to get people treated quickly for a stroke? Well, if you've had a clot-based stroke, modern medicine can now give you clot-busting drugs to dissolve the clot, which means less of your brain is killed off by the stroke. And there are surgical interventions where you can actually remove large clots from the brain or the circulation in the neck going up to the brain, again, to preserve brain function. So time is critical. And within this article, it says that we are performing the delays in getting to a stroke unit are an hour and a half longer than they were 10 years ago. So there is a tangible degradation in service provision and clearly the knock-on effects to patients. It's quite shocking. And how many people are getting to specialized stroke units? Well, the figures were 46% of stroke victims get to a specialized stroke unit, but that's 10% less than a decade ago as well.
Yeah.
So we are providing worse service than we were 10 years ago. Out of every stroke unit in the country, 70% of them have a consultant vacancy.
Wow.
And others have other staff vacancies. So you can see that this is not some act of God. This is deliberate policy to restrict consultant positions and training posts such that we end up with people dying unnecessarily. Now, some commentators might suggest that this is social murder. This is part of the austerity program, the part of neoliberalism, which is destined to prioritize profit over care. And elderly people who no longer are economically active or paying taxes, the neoliberal view of that person is they're no longer worth preserving, right? So we have sociopathic policy having a tangible, measurable effect on the quality of care of stroke patients in this country.
But Bob, we've had a Labour government now for 18 months, more than 18 months. Are things improving, or are they staying the same, or getting worse in this regard?
Well, there's no attempt to expand the number of training posts for consultant positions. So, the current government, the Labour government, is still in dispute with resident doctors, or junior doctors as they were formerly known. I have heard no announcement in consultant expansion numbers. There isn't a plan to expand capacity within the NHS. We know our ambulance services are struggling. They're a major part of why there are delays getting to hospital in time. So nothing that would fix this problem has been announced. Yet we're going to go on to talk about frivolous IT-based solutions that West Streeting wants to chuck millions and millions of pounds at.
Yeah, ridiculous. It really is. And I mean, I've got a personal interest in this because my dad suffered a stroke, which killed him, actually. He suffered a stroke in 1997 and he died the following year. But as I understand it, Bob, and you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong, the treatment is much more successful, much more sophisticated than it was in more than 25 years ago. It's getting on for 30 years, isn't it now, ago. So actually a lot more people, would survive, and maybe are still surviving, notwithstanding the shortages that you mentioned, but still more could presumably survive and make a full recovery if there was the proper systems in place and the proper resources being diverted to make sure that we have the stroke consultants to be able to treat people properly. I mean, is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. We saw an earlier transformation in cardiac care where people were saying, look, you need to get to an appropriate hospital as quick as possible because every second delay means more of your heart muscle dies off. Well, that same approach applies to brain function and brain cells, and the quicker you get treatment, because it was through the heart, the advances in cardiology that have been extended to stroke care, and that's predominantly in the form of reducing the size of clots that go on to give strokes and allowing brain to recover
Mm.
in a recoverable time before the damage is permanent. So
Yeah.
yes, the advances have been made in recent decades that weren't available back in the 90s.
No, indeed. And I mean, the thing with my dad, I don't want to focus obviously on my own personal thing, but this will be something which is relevant to lots of people. Apart from the disabling, physical disabling aspects of it, it took his speech away. I mean, what's the situation now with regard to getting, people's speech back in that sense in terms of the treatment that's available?
Yeah, so in the acute setting, um, your speech is taken care of on the left side of your brain. So if your stroke is on the left side and it's not dealt with, then more and more of that speech center is damaged. So the chances of you recovering get fewer and fewer the longer the
Yeah,
delay. So
yeah,
that is the issue. And strokes can affect any part of the brain. If it affects the frontal part of the brain, it can have personality and mood effects. If it affects the back of the brain, it can affect visual processing. So the location of the stroke we have no control over,
no,
but how much damage the stroke does is time critical
yes.
and critical on reaching specialist centers which are fully staffed by appropriately trained doctors and nurses.
I mean, you mentioned social murder. I mean that's probably an apt description. Given that we've got the technology now, the modern medicines, etc., to treat the people and restore their life, to a functioning life. I know. Again, going back to my father's case, and again, this will be relevant to lots of people who experience stroke and lose their speech. He became incredibly, depressed and frustrated about that, and he wanted to die in the end, but he just didn't want to be here anymore. I mean, and there'll be lots of people like that if they're not getting this treatment in time, needlessly. I mean, that's absolutely shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, there are so many knock-on effects. First of all, you're left with a very damaged or disabled individual. That has a huge impact on the family in terms of caring responsibilities. The person who had a stroke might still have been of working age, so that's an income out of the household that has gone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you have the support services that are running on empty, who might be able to help with the continuing rehabilitation of those patients. We used to have a stroke rehabilitation unit in Sidcup, which is just down the road from my practice, but that was closed as part of the cuts to services, the supposed rationalization of services, which were actually private finance initiative led cuts. So they used the debts of neighboring hospitals to shut down our rehabilitation center,
Yeah.
which meant that patients of mine who did have a stroke or suffered from other neurological conditions like MS weren't getting the treatment, and they ended up being more and more dependent on their families and carers, and that has a huge knock-on effect on society.
Yeah, no, absolutely. By the way, to people who are listening, if you want to raise a point, ask a question to Bob, feel free to indicate. I think you can indicate that on the screen. Raise your hand, and we'll bring you in. Well, let's move on then, Bob. I mean, I mentioned in the opening remarks, and you just touched on it as well, about these new online services that West Streeting, the alleged health secretary, is happily throwing millions of pounds out. Just say a bit about that, will you, Bob, and why we should be concerned.
Yeah, so this was an article we shared, published on the independent website. The title, NHS Online to offer video appointments for 9 common conditions. Now, this might sound as a good idea. No doubt West Streeting will be claiming that this is a way of reducing the waiting list, but patients don't come to me asking for online services. What they want is face-to-face services with appropriately qualified people delivered in a timely fashion. And the trajectory of government policy is increasingly to replace in-person care with virtual or online substitutes. Now, you're not replacing like with like, you're replacing something superior with something inferior. You're also removing that very key person-to-person contact. You're removing the ability for the health professional to examine the patient. You're also removing the ability for that human connection, which is very important in terms of the doctor getting a feel of the patient and also patient developing trust within the caregiver. So this is a degradation in service from my point of view. The other thing within the article was the fact that these online services will be able to send you off to have various scans. Now, the article doesn't expand on who's going to provide these scans, right? Well, between me and you, we know where these scans are going to be provided in the private sector.
Yeah.
Because the private sector is rapidly expanding their provision of imaging and other interventions for patients, which will then be commissioned by these new NHS online services, which I also suspect will be provided by the private sector.
Yeah.
So you have a new private sector initiative referring to other private sector initiatives, thereby rerouting funding away from NHS provision and providing an inferior service. So these scans that will be provided will not be provided in-house to the consultants from other colleagues that he trusts and has a working relationship. So this is a further fragmentation of the cohesive working of different groups of professionals within an institution. So it is yet another loss to the service.
No, indeed. And I note in the article that you referred to, Bob, that Sir Keir Starmer is quoted as saying, "A new world is coming." I guess you'd agree with that. You probably would say it's not a great new world, though.
Yes, it's a new world, and it's a new bonanza for the people in big tech and the private providers. And this is a new opportunity for yet more profit siphoning out of service provision.
And what do you make of Wes Streeting's comment as well? He said it's going to make accessing healthcare as simple as ordering a cab or a takeaway, fundamentally changing how people interact with the NHS for generations to come. Makes it all sound really, really quite hunky-dory, doesn't it?
Well, I think we're seeing the health effects of making takeaways very easy to order in terms of growing national obesity figures, right? So I think that's quite a poor comparison, and it's quite demeaning to professionals to make out that they are as valued as providing a takeaway or a taxi, right? So I find it insulting on several levels. But convenience and accessibility should never be a substitute for quality and safety and outcomes. And what is missing from these articles is any robust evidence that actually it delivers patient benefit. Medicine is not about convenience. It's not about ordering tests that you feel that you need. You need to have a sufficient case to be going and spending additional resource. But what they are promoting is this sort of supermarket approach to healthcare. Well, that will ultimately bankrupt healthcare if you're not judicious in terms of where you spend resources.
We've had a comment from one of our listeners, Bob, who said, "Of course, the NHS management is perpetrating highly preventable social murder. Neglected people get railroaded fast into death. They get quickly disabled and become candidates for state murder, becoming both vulnerable to assault by inappropriate EOL drugs and indeed go on to say become suicidal." I mean, what do you make of that, Bob? Would you agree with that?
Well, I hear comments like this quite often. And if you look at what's happened in countries like Canada, who've been going down the euthanasia path for more years than we have, increasingly younger and younger people are being euthanized, very often not for life-threatening conditions. For example, being in debt, being depressed are now qualifications for Canadians to be entered into early termination of life. Now, it just so happens that Canada is now the world's leading country in terms of organ donation, which is yet another business which is being built on the back of people who are being euthanized. So the concerns that are, put forward and implied in that comment are real, and they are real and expanding. And unfortunately, we are following the Canadian path in terms of normalizing euthanasia.
Yeah. Let me bring in Sean now, if I can, Bob, one of our listeners. She's raised her hand and wants to say something. Sean, the floor is yours. Oh, Sean.
Hello.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Sean.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to click the unmute button. Happy
No
New
worries.
Year to you both.
And you, mate.
My question is really for both of you. As you know, Chris, I've been quite poorly for about the last 20 months now, and I've really struggled to get help. I've persevered with my own GP. I've been going through numerous GPs trying to get somebody who will help me, and I finally found one of the GPs at the practice who is trying to help, although she doesn't have the in-depth knowledge to completely help me.
Yeah.
She suspects neurological Sjogren's with dysautonomia. So it's a range between autoimmune disease and neurological issues, plus some cardio issues. Now, my problem is I first went to the GP and was referred to a specialist ENT consultant when I lost my hearing. That was kind of one of the more severe symptoms that happened, which was just after the general elections, actually. And I lost the hearing in my left ear. I was suffering with vertigo. So I was sent to an ENT consultant. The ENT consultant did some tests and couldn't help. So I was then referred to neurology, and I've been waiting on a neurology appointment ever since. In the meantime, the GP referred me to rheumatology. Rheumatology triaged me and said they don't want to see me. So I can't get a rheumatology appointment on the NHS. So in desperation, because my symptoms have severely worsened, I walk with a stick now. My vertigo is very severe. Racing heartbeat when I'm walking and all the rest of it. It's it's really severe. I'm quite disabled now, and I think if I'd have been treated 20 months ago properly, my conditions could have been halted at that point, and instead I'm getting more severe. I can't get PIP because I've had no diagnosis yet. So when you apply for PIP, they want all sorts of information and proof that you've got all these illnesses. So I think my question to Bob is, I mean, I've ended up having to book a private appointment, which goes against everything
that you believe in.
for.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm desperate. So it's cost me 275 quid for I've got an appointment at the end of January with a consultant rheumatologist who specializes in autoimmune issues. But I still, if I go and see him, I might then have to go and book another appointment with a neurologist or another appointment with a cardiologist.
Right.
And I just wanted to ask Bob, 20 to 30 years ago, we used to get sent to one consultant who, or a general consultant who would be able to do all the tests and everything for you. And now you've got to go to all these different departments. There's specialists for everything, but no one person who specializes in everything. So I can see this costing an absolute fortune if I have to go private with all the rest of the stuff.
Of course.
And it's money that I haven't got.
No, indeed.
Because I'm not eligible for any benefits.
No.
So I just wanted to ask Bob really what his opinion is on all these different specialists, and also on the waiting lists, and also people getting more ill because we're waiting such long times. And also, Chris, your opinion on the PIP.
Yes, Bob, over to you, mate. Firstly,
first of all, sorry to hear all the trouble you've had and the impact it's had on you. Unfortunately, this is quite a common occurrence. In terms of this toing and froing between specialists, it's definitely become more of a problem. So when I was working in hospitals, predominantly in respiratory medicine, we had the ability of internally referring patients who we thought we couldn't help, but we thought maybe another specialist would be able to help. So you had this sort of fast track internal referral mechanism, which didn't involve bouncing you back to the GP, and it allowed for relationships to develop between specialities. One consultant would do a favor for another consultant and vice versa. It built camaraderie. It took away some of the delays in being seen, but it was also an opportunity to educate each other. So they would communicate with each other and the GP and learn whilst they were trying to help the patient along. So those natural opportunities for cross-fertilization and learning have become diminished. And this is a direct consequence of the introduction of the market, because the market within the NHS did not incentivize cross-referral from one consultant to the next, because the hospital would attract a greater fee for every new external referral. So the patient now became a sort of a cog in the wheel of an increasingly complicated machine, which did not deliver them any benefit whatsoever, and ended up creating a bureaucracy which was monitoring first referrals rather than internal referrals. So there no longer became an incentive for consultants to try and get to the bottom of what was happening with the patient. There was no point showing an interest, because they had no impact on the subsequent journey that patient would take through the hospital system. So you actually breed disinterest.
Yeah.
So you have specialists now who say, well, this isn't my problem, back to your GP. And that's the end of the matter, right? So you make it more difficult for the patient, and you degrade the quality of the service.
Yes, indeed. I mean, and your point about, the internal markets, etc. I mean, the whole marketization of public services is also an issue in relation to the personal independence, so-called personal independence payments system. All sorts of problems associated with that. I mean, the system's not fit for purpose, Sean. Excuse me, in my opinion. It's been, look, it's another cash cow for the private sector. A lot of people who go for these assessments are treated very, very badly. The assessments are very poor. There's very long delays, inaccurate, and just adds to the stress. That people who are experiencing significant health problems. It just adds to those problems. I mean, we haven't got a welfare state to be proud of like we used to have. We haven't really got a safety net anymore. I mean, it's about sort of demonizing people, and it's absolutely disgusting to see, in my opinion, politicians, many of whom have never wanted for anything in their life, to be penny pinching and so incredibly parsimonious in relation to the support that we should be providing to people who are vulnerable at the end of the day, sick and disabled people, and it's completely wrong-headed as well, I think, economically. Because I mean, I know you, Sean, are someone who was a high performer, and you could be contributing to indeed should be able to be contributing to the economy, and that would obviously benefit you, and it benefits society at large. I just don't get this. I just don't get what they are doing. So I've no time at all for the whole system. It needs completely, revising and ripping up and starting again, and really getting back, I think, to first principles. When the welfare state was introduced, and we're certainly not there now. Sorry, Sean, I think you were trying to come in and say something.
Yeah, that was going to be my point as well, Chris, that I don't want to be lying here in bed all the time.
Of course not. No.
It's as you can imagine, some days I get really depressed, and you do think, what am I here for?
Yes, exactly.
What is my life? I haven't got a life.
No, indeed.
What is the point? I try not to think like that. There's a lot of people that are worse off than me, but you can't help it. I want to be working. I want to get back to work. But
Of course.
I'm only
Yeah.
55. I've got at least
Yeah.
another 10 years left in me. And
Yeah.
I've worked since the age of 15. I don't. I hate it. I hate sitting around doing nothing.
Of course.
It's really hard, especially when you see people saying, oh, the DWP are cracking down on giving benefits to people, and then you get the far right who were saying, oh, you shouldn't be getting mobility cars and this, that and the other.
No, exactly.
When you can't get anything at all, you can't get a penny because you can't get a diagnosis. And I would rather be working than lying here in bed all the time. It's incredibly frustrating and upsetting, and I would just say to people that you have to be firm, and you have to advocate for yourself. The amount of times I've had to phone up the hospitals myself, chasing appointments up because you get nothing through the post. You phone your GP and you say, oh, I've been waiting like 3 months for an appointment, I've heard nothing, and they say, oh, phone this number, you have to phone the hospital yourself, and then you phone the hospital and they go, oh, you're not on our system. It's just ridiculous. That's thank you very much anyway for answering my questions. Thanks, Bob.
All the best.
Thanks for the call, Sean. I guess that Sean's comments will probably resonate with people you see, Bob. I'm sure. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. A very vivid example springs to mind. A young chap, very fit and well. He worked as a civil servant. He was in his 40s. Unfortunately, he developed a severely trapped nerve in his neck, which was disabling him in terms of pain. And he needed quite urgent neurosurgical treatment to decompress the nerve. He waited 18 months for surgery, by the end of which it caused a severe strain. He wasn't able to work. It caused a severe strain on his marriage, his finances, and it left permanent damage.
Yes, indeed.
What the governments have been doing is destroying healthcare and, in fact, increasing dependency on benefits through their policies on healthcare.
Yeah. And the other thing as well that Sean mentioned, Bob, she's been driven to desperation to go against the principles, really, to try to get some sort of resolution by, booking a sort of private appointment. Now, that, again, I think will be something that, lots of people find themselves forced into doing. And actually that will have a significant impact on their personal finances as well. I mean, because, it's not cheap, is it? I mean, we'll come on to the private health insurance con in a minute, but people who aren't insured, who are in that situation like Sean is, I mean, do you know of? I mean, I guess you probably do know of examples where your own patients have felt compelled to do that because of the delays that they've experienced. And then, of course, you've people who simply just haven't got the resources, much as they might wish to do that, to be able to take that route.
Yeah, I had a patient who was languishing on a waiting list for a hip replacement, who decided in the end his quality of life was so bad that he would get another mortgage on his house. So this was a chap in his 70s. He took out a loan on his house equity to pay 7 or 8 grand for a hip replacement. And this is a chap who had been reasonably fit and well all his life, paid his taxation for 60 odd years. And when he needed the NHS, it let him down. And there's growing resentment of people who realize the services are no longer there when they need them.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely appalling, mate. It really is. But just on that note then, Bob, moving on to the private insurance con that I spoke about in the introduction, and the particular case of a chap called James Guthrie, who was well provided for, I think he thought, anyway, in terms of his Bupa insurance, I believe it was. But when push came to shove, when he had a serious health problem, they absolutely let him down. Just tell us a bit about that case, will you, Bob? And just really illustrates, I think, it's just, what a dreadful broken system we have now in our country.
Yeah, so I think this is a very useful case. It was published in the Times about 2 or 3 years ago, and this gentleman was a retired King's Counsel. So he was a barrister. He'd paid into Bupa for many years. So he was insured by one of the biggest insurers in this country, I believe. And unfortunately, he developed bowel cancer, and which required treatment, and treatment for cancer can be very expensive. So he was originally, in 2014, when he was diagnosed, paying around £6,000 a year in Bupa health insurance. But by 7 or 8 years down the line, his premium had risen to, get ready for this, almost £164,000 per year.
Incredible.
Right?
That's just astonishing.
Now, I'll put it to you.
Even for a wealthy person, that's prohibitive, isn't it?
It is prohibitive. And how do we explain this? Well, so many people have the perception that if you pay into insurance, it's like paying into a pension, you're building up a pot. No. Insurance works by assessing your risk for that year based on your current health status, and that risk changes every year. First of all, you're getting older, and if you had a medical episode, it goes on to your next year's premium, right? So what happened was he was getting expensive treatment, and the only way the companies can make a profit is to bump up your premium every year, such that in lots of cases who need expensive treatment, they're priced out of care. That's what people need to understand, that the private health insurance model is fine when you're well and you think you're covered, but as soon as you become sick and expensive, you will be priced out of care, or you'll just be dumped arbitrarily. And it's even worse in America, where lots of insurance is linked to your employment. Well, what happens when you become seriously ill and lose your job? You have no insurance. So those people who think they can avoid the harms of what's happening to the NHS by taking out private insurance, you've got another thing to think about, because when you really need it, the insurance won't be there.
No, indeed. Well, insurance companies are only in business to make money. They're not there to. I mean, all the glossy publicity really is a con, isn't it? I mean, they're not really that interested in providing good healthcare. What they want to do is provide good profits and good dividends for their shareholders.
Absolutely, and this is what they get away with. Lack of public awareness of how the insurance industry really works, and this is quite a staggering case. I'll encourage listeners to go and have a look at the case of James Guthrie. You just have to search Bupa, James Guthrie, and the Times, and have a good read of that to really take home the message that you are not protected by private insurance. If you get a cancer, you'll be priced out of care.
I mean, and just on that point, Bob, I think it might be worth just listening to a comment from Nigel Farage, because a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the political class at the moment, they're fed up with the Labour Party, and are turning to Reform UK, thinking that they're an anti-establishment political party, that they will shake things up, that that it couldn't be any worse, could it, under Farage? I'm not actually sure that is the case. It's pretty bad now, as we know. But Chris, can you just play that clip from Nigel Farage, only a short one, and let people hear what he's got to say?
Sure. Clear. Do you want it still funded through general taxation, or you think you need to look at the funding model?
I do not want it funded through general taxation.
Right. Okay.
It doesn't work.
Well, look, I mean, just to sort of summarize what he was saying is kind of reiterating, and this is a recent interview he had, reiterating his previous public position that he doesn't really support a publicly funded national health service. He couches it in economically illiterate terms, because he talks about he doesn't want to see taxes funding the National Health Service. He seems to want to go down the insurance route, which, as Dr. Bob has just pointed out, is fraught with all sorts of pitfalls and and problems. And so people really, I think, do need to be, mindful about that, particularly the fact that if you look at the polls, it seems to suggest that Reform UK as a bloc seem to, if you kind of break it down in terms of where their support comes from, it does tend to be a larger proportion of the older population are turning to reform. Not exclusively, obviously, but it's the older population. They're going to need the National Health Service, aren't they, Bob, more than younger people are. I mean, the older you get, the more likely you're going to have. I know that from my own personal position. The more you're going to need the National Health Service, and the less sort of lucrative you will be viewed as being by the insurance company.
Absolutely, the premium is decided upon your age and pre-existing conditions. So the way they estimate your premium will often leave out the people who need health provision. So the insurance-based system is a way of not getting healthcare if you need it. You're just paying for phony reassurance that the healthcare will be there. Now, a lot of these insurance policies, particularly in the States, you pay your premium, but when you come to claim, there is what's called an out-of-pocket expense, a bit like an excess if you have a car accident, and that might run into the tens of thousands. So you're paying this premium thinking you're covered, and then unless your bill for that year exceed $15,000-$20,000, you won't receive a penny from your insurance company. So they are just sucking out premium and delivering nothing for the majority of their policy holders. And what Nigel Farage is relying on is a lack of awareness of how health insurance works, having no perception of how the Americans are coping with their privatized insurance-dominated system, and not realizing that the NHS has been led into this very poor position by the very policies that are proposing an insurance-led system. So we've had the sabotage by Nigel Farage and the neoliberal bloc, which they're now using because the public are softened up to justify a further transition to a worse, more expensive system.
No, indeed, it's really troubling, and it's a real important cautionary tale, I think, that you just outlined, Bob, and hopefully people will scrutinise Reform UK a little bit more, because they are speaking with forked tongue, it seems to me, in terms of what they're promising the general public. Just before we move on to the perhaps the final issue in relation to the Zionist charter, which is being imposed on the National Health Service, there was a comment from somebody who was talking about Sean's case, actually, and the view was that they'd been let down because they thought that the hospital system, she should have been in the hospital system. They're thinking it's some sort of tech breakdown. I mean, would that be fair, Bob, or is it more problematic than that?
No, I think it's when you get complex cases, you require several different specialists involved. Because of that inability to cross-refer and to work in a cooperative manner with other specialists, this ends up bouncing out to the GP. It happens all the time in my practice. And, alongside that, there's this problem of lack of information, because the discharge letters from one specialist don't always include what they're concerned about and what they want from the second specialist. So there's a dilution in the exchange of crucial information as well.
No, indeed, absolutely. And let me just remind our listeners and viewers, if you want to raise a question or make a point to Bob, just raise your hand and we'll bring you in. Let me move on then, Bob, if I can, to the imposition, as I've said, of the Zionist Charter on the National Health Service. That's the what's it called? The IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, which was, I think, adopted by the National Health Service in October of last year, and it's now being subjected to a legal challenge, and people can contribute to that, but the legal challenge is being mounted by people who are concerned about free speech and the right to protest, and are arguing that this is going to fetter the ability of people to speak out. And we're already seeing how many NHS doctors, specialists, consultants, etc., have been suspended, have been targeted by Israel lawyers for Israel, etc., by the campaign against anti-Semitism, and it's already having a chilling impact. And this legal challenge is being taken on by Imran Khan and partners, the lawyers, the legal firm Imran Khan and partners. But what's your thoughts, Bob, about this IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism being inflicted on the National Health Service? I mean, it's even being criticised by the originators of it, who are saying it's chilling free speech. I mean, as I was saying in my opening remarks, you don't need 285 words to describe what anti-Semitism is. It's a very clear and obvious definition, which is outlined in about, I think, 8 words in the Oxford English Dictionary. It's discrimination and hatred of Jews because they are Jews. You don't need all those words, 11 clauses, 285 words. Unless, of course, it's about stopping criticism of Israel, which it clearly is. And Israel, as I've again mentioned in the opening, is mentioned 7 times in those 11 clauses. So, it's clearly all about, preventing people speaking out about the genocide in Gaza, about the exploitation, the brutality, which is visited on the Palestinian people, not just in Gaza, but right across the West Bank, and has been for getting on for 80 years now. I mean, since 1948, when Israel was first established.
Yeah, it's a very troubling development. I've been quite outspoken. Well, I don't think I've been outspoken actually, but I've joined social media in posting stuff which is critical of Israel. Then I was subjected to a regulatory referral myself to the General Medical Council, and then to NHS England from a group called UK Lawyers for Israel. I was very careful not to post anything which would be offensive to any normal human being. What I was very careful to post was the views of key, predominantly Jewish academics and activists and politically active people, retweeting them perhaps with a quote tweet on occasion. People like Norman Finkelstein, Noam Chomsky, Ilan Pappé, various other respected international commentators on the Israel-Palestine tragedy. And this seemed to offend people. Now, I know since that hundreds of healthcare workers have been had disciplinary action or reports made against them, which sends out a very strong signal to the rest of the staff that this is a topic that you cannot comment on in public, because the Zionist lobby are very worried that health professionals are generally well respected, and if they're also commenting on the atrocities and the genocide, this would gather significant public attention, and rightly so. So the fact that they're adopting this definition, which conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, is extremely retrograde step in terms of expressing political speech and political views that are not in any way derogatory to one section of the community or other, but these are directed at the political actions of the state of Israel, and not at individuals, and not at a religion. And there are many Jewish commentators who time and time again make this critically clear, that to object to what Netanyahu is doing to the population of Gaza and the West Bank has got nothing to do with Judaism. In fact, many Zionists are not Jewish at all. Most of them are Christian Zionists. And Zionism was never founded out of a religious belief. This is a political ideology and has nothing to do with religion.
No, indeed. Well, we've got a couple of our listeners who are wanting to contribute now. I've got Magnus Langton. I'll bring in first. Magnus, was this something that you wanted to speak about, or was it another topic?
Actually, we'll go with John Homer first.
Oh, okay then. Yeah, if we can't get Magnus, let's have John. John, what would you like to say?
Yeah, thanks. So, hi, Chris and Bob. Yeah, listening to. I'm glad you brought up this question. Worked in that. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah.
We can, yes, perfectly.
Yeah, that's good. So, as you know, I worked in the health service for a number of years. But I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist now, and my own professional body is the British Association of Behavioural and Cognitive Psychotherapies, blah, blah, blah. Now, they've got a journal called CBT Today, and they were publishing an article about multiculturalism and actually mainly Islamophobia, but racism. And they use the word, this is going to be familiar to you, Chris, the G word. They said genocide, unqualified, and they had UK Lawyers for Israel. Basically, they had to apologise publicly, and then they had to detract the original statement. They said they had complaints from their own members and outside bodies. So basically, I'm doing the anti-Semitism training in February, which we've all got to do. And the sinister thing about this, as you say, is the IHRA definition is it's basically conflating any criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. And I just want to make one last point that there's a lot of Jewish groups that are against this sort of drive, and they're saying that, you know, in a way this is feeding into some tropes of anti-Semitism, such as Jews taking over and all of that kind of thing. So I think there's a kind of a political battle within the Jewish community about this, but I'm looking forward to the training, and I'm wondering which way it's going to lean, because I think it can lean different ways. But the whole thing.
Well, if it's based on the IHRA, which seems likely, it's going to be based on pro-Zionist propaganda.
Yeah,
which is bugger all to do with anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is hardly a thing in the United Kingdom these days.
Not really.
Real anti-Semitism hardly exists.
Obviously, there's been one or two moments, but
it's a disgrace that, you know, that the state is putting so much resource behind this, and it's an indication, in my opinion, that basically Britain's occupied by the Zionist entity. I mean, they're calling the shots, Netanyahu and the rest of it, in Britain and in the United States.
Literally calling the shots, Chris. And you know, you've seen it with the football issue with West Midlands Police. You've seen it with, obviously, you know about yourself, with what happened with the Labour Party before, and there's no doubt still going on. And the whole thing has been political, and as Bob says, it's not anything to do with religion. I think that I don't even like to use the Z word, but it's used to delegitimize anti-Semitism.
Well, you know, even as I was saying earlier, I don't know if you joined us by that time, but the author of the main author of the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition, Kenneth Stern, has basically rubbished it and said it's being misused and is being used to chill free speech. And it's very, very clear that is exactly what it's being done for.
Yes,
and I think Bob had said,
the NHS are actually, because it's not statutory, it's advisory, so to speak. It doesn't have any basis in law, that definition. But if the NHS adopt it, then it becomes statutory in some way, if that's imposed to, say, for example, as Bob said, discipline staff for perhaps saying something or posting something on social media that just basically criticizes Israel.
No, indeed. I mean, well, it won't be statutory unless there's legislation passed, of course, but it certainly has, incredible force when it's adopted by, public institutions like the National Health Service, like various universities all over the country, and is being used to actually target people, humanitarian people who, which is kind of 99% of the population, I would argue, is against genocide.
Exactly.
And it's being very much used to basically shut them up. and to give Israel a free run at doing whatever they like. And we absolutely, it seems to me, have to stand out against this. And this is where I think the trade unions are letting us down. Why are they not speaking out against it? They should be calling for industrial action, in my opinion, against this imposition. It's an absolute disgrace that people are being subjected to this type of thing and having their careers impacted, having their careers actually destroyed in certain circumstances. For what? For Israel? It's just nonsense. It just should not be allowed to happen. I feel very strongly about this, as you can probably tell by my voice and how I'm articulating. But it really is disgraceful that they're being allowed to get away with that. And institutions that should be there to protect workers, the trade unions, are saying next to nothing about it. And indeed, some of them are actually going along with it. I mean, I know, for example, the General Secretary of the GMB, one of the biggest unions, used this nonsense about anti-Semitism to cancel Low-Key, the well-known rapper, from speaking at the Toll Puddle Festival, a celebration of trade union rights and a commemoration of the treatment of the Toll Puddle martyrs. And he was prevented from speaking there because of his stance on Israel, his stance on anti-Semitism, his association with me, ironically, as well, would you believe? But let me move on. Thanks for that, John. Anyway, interesting. And let me bring in Magnus now, probably as our last contributor, because we're almost out of time now.
Yeah. I have a question for Bob, and it's specifically about medical provision. Now, I've got a couple of friends in their 50s who are going through the menopause, and they have both really, really suffered at the hands of their GPs in trying to get HRT treatment. And in both cases, this went on for months or indeed years, where the HRT would not be given to these women, despite horrendous symptoms that both of them were suffering. And on the other hand, I'm hearing about women, middle class women, who are just being given HRT like at the first visit. And I was wondering if there was something specifically regarding HRT treatment that Bob could speak about and the allocation of those resources.
Bob?
Yeah, so
probably have to be fairly brief because we're nearly out of time.
Yeah, so HRT is not expensive. Different GPs have a different threshold for prescribing. What I think is important to rule out in terms of the rejection is it being done on medical grounds? For example, had those people had a diagnosis of breast cancer, had they suffered from some form of clot, either a deep vein thrombosis, do they suffer with migraines? So there are genuine medical reasons not to prescribe estrogen, and I'm hoping that's the reason why these people have found it difficult to get hold of. But there are also some GPs who are, just aren't readily able to prescribe for whatever reason, lack of awareness, lack of belief in the efficacy. But I also want to put this forward to you that HRT estrogen has its own risk, and ideally it should only be used to manage what are called vasomotor symptoms, i.e. hot flushes, night sweats, that sort of thing. So when people claim I've got brain fog and all these other less evidence-based reasons for getting HRT, then the balance of risk and benefit is not that favorable. So, nobody comes to thank the doctor when they've suffered a complication of a drug that they shouldn't have been on. They run off to their solicitors, right? So no drug is completely safe, and a physician who is practicing good medicine will take the individual risk into account and offer viable options. And if HRT isn't one of them, for good reason, then it shouldn't be prescribed.
Right, okay. We're going to have to probably leave it there now because we are at 6 o'clock. I want to thank Dr. Bob Gill for his contribution again this evening. And thank you, everybody, for joining us and for your comments and questions. We appreciate that. And I'll just close by giving you the web link for the fundraising, the crowdfunding campaign to challenge the imposition of the IHRA on working definition of anti-Semitism on the National Health Service. It's www.crowdjustice.com/defend-free-speech/. I'll just say that one more time. www.crowdjustice.com/case/defend-free-speech/. Thanks very much again, Bob. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you next week at the same time, all being well. Good night.
Thank you.